Welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Machine Learning. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Burke, and I do data engineering and machine learning at Databricks. And I'm joined by my co-host,
Ben Wilson. I write release notes and release versions of MLflow at Databricks.
Today we are joined by Alex. He studied psychology at Harvard and since then has taken a variety of professional roles. For instance, he was SVP at Handy, an assembly and installation partner for large retail companies, and that was acquired by Angie, the company behind Angie's List. After that, he worked as a VC partner at Blue Trail Partners, specifically focusing on Series A, and most recently he founded Regal, a data-driven outreach tool to help companies reach customers. So Alex, I saw you studied under the legendary Steven Pinker. How was that experience, and what was your thesis on?
Hey, I had a great time at school. At Harvard, typically they like you to take different, they call them something separate, but majors basically. And instead, I did sort of a unusual thing and basically dictated a course of study that was across a number of different departments. So my course of study was largely around consciousness and the underpinnings of consciousness. And Pinker, who's a linguist by trade, has sort of migrated into that area of, how did humans become conscious? How do you know if you're conscious? What is consciousness? Like, what does it mean? Like, what is human nature? And so it was fun to be able to take classes in philosophy, neuroscience, biology, whatever, as long as it stayed to that tact. So yeah, I had a great time. I definitely considered becoming an academic and realized I did not want to stay by myself in a room for the next 100 years studying just to get to the edge of what was known about the human mind and philosophy. And, it was much more exciting to go into technology where, a lot of this is so new, you can study for a month and be at the edge of what's known and then go be breaking new ground. And so for me, that was much more attractive.
Got it. And have you been able to fulfill that goal of being cutting edge in the professional world?
Yeah, like I say, I'm sure you could choose areas that are harder to know, but a lot of this is all so new. If I think about the area we're in within voice, when we started, we've always played around with the voice agents, the AI voice agents. It was terrible 4 years ago. In the last 6 months, we've made enough improvements, not the LLMs, but actually how we use those have made enough improvements that, we're going to start rolling out voice agents to our customers now that are really indistinguishable from humans in a lot of use cases. And it's just like a great opportunity because what we as a company are very good at is staying at the very edge of what's possible, right? When you're in a business, it's kind of like an arms race if you're in a consumer business, in that if you can use the latest marketing techniques, the latest customer service techniques, the latest, in how you engage the customer, you have an advantage over your competition. And so, for us as a vendor, it's great if we can stay really at the cutting edge of what's possible.
Ben, question for you as a TL. So currently I'm working with a customer that invented their own LangChain because LangChain is too unstable. And so I was wondering what your thoughts are when to adopt a new product. You probably don't want to be the first person. You definitely don't want to be the last person, but is there a point in the distribution that's optimal?
It depends on what the DNA of your culture is at your company, I think. And that was a question I was going to ask you, Alex,
Yeah, I see what you're doing. You're spinning around and putting it on me now.
But I'm curious from your perspective, because you're dealing with probably cutting edge startups as well as well-established large enterprise companies. And I see it from my side, where we're building tools for basically R&D to use to build products.
Yeah.
You're offering products for customers to say, hey, just use this thing. It works really well. We built it for you or customized it for you, and it'll work and solve all these problems. But I'm wondering if you see the same thing that I see on the R&D side, with certain companies just being completely unwilling or completely incapable, not due to a talent shortage, although sometimes that does happen, but more they have such crippling tech debt. Like they've hired consultants over decades that have come in that are sort of bargain bidders, and they've built an abomination that their entire stack runs on. And you just look at that and you're like, well, we can't integrate anything with this because it's so old, it's so fragile, or it's just so big. And there's too many pieces to integrate with. I'm wondering if you see that as well in your field, to be like, hey, we need to kind of do this off to the side. We can't integrate with your full tech stack because
Yeah.
nobody can integrate with it.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a slightly different perspective to start from. So, let's just take a very big company, pick your industry. Like I worked for a long time for a company called Thomson Reuters, which has a number of businesses, but one of their big businesses is in financial services. When there was very little change in the industry, when things weren't changing, they had a massive advantage as the incumbent because they could continue to keep customers using the things they were using. They already had those relationships. Customers weren't trying to get the new thing. They, as Thomson Reuters, didn't need to invest in making sure their technology R&D processes were the best because the things weren't changing. It didn't matter if the product improved. In periods where all of a sudden in financial services there are massive changes, they had a structural disadvantage because they weren't set up to do R&D, weren't set up to do innovation, weren't set up to offer customers a weird pricing deal for some new product. And startups have that advantage. So I always come back to that sort of famous expression. Who wins is dictated by whether what happens first, basically, whether a incumbent gets innovation or a startup gets distribution. So that's always like the battle, and it's just two very different strategies to approach it. So if as we were talking about before, I think about ourselves in the AI market. If what happens is the state of virtual agents today plateaus, our advantage in that area is going to very quickly go away. And even if it's slow, at some point the big incumbents like Five9, Nice, Genesis in the contact center space will have that tool, and we'll lose out because even though we're the innovative startup, there's nothing new to innovate on. If, on the other hand, you believe Altman and the rate of improvement in AI is going to continue to be exponential, well, guess who has an advantage? We do, because we're really good at staying ahead of the curve, and we pride ourselves here upon DNA on creating an organization that's good at that and making it possible for our customers to have the edge of what's possible. And the incumbents are going to really struggle because even if we don't have the distribution today, everybody's going to be clamoring for what we have because it's new in a way that's not just different, but new in a way that actually provides a better outcome.
As a leader, how do you emotionally handle knowing that a large company could come in and swoop and just destroy your business?
Well, I mean, again, having worked at a very big business, like I know, like I today could literally walk up to the CEO of Thomson Reuters, a company with 100,000 employees and billions of dollars in revenue, tell him how I was going to take his business down, draw a diagram, have a conversation for a month, and he couldn't do anything about it. It is just not a fear that I have, and like I think people have this irrational fear that somebody's going to go and destroy their business. It's not how it works. Sure, there are certain industries where there are network effects, and it's people have basically built a monopoly, and it is hard if an incumbent comes in. In most businesses, that's not the case. Like there aren't network effects such that it makes it a monopoly, and anybody can go and compete. It's just a question of like I said, which strategy is better. Like sometimes it is better to be the incumbent. Sometimes it is better to be the innovator. And having the perseverance to stick by the strategy if you think it's right.
Are you ever terrified, as an aside to that? And something I've always wondered, why don't more of the established incumbent companies that have majority market share in certain industries adopt some of the sort of development philosophy of, I'm not saying like become like a startup, because that's not possible at an established company. There's no way to do that, but some big companies do establish sort of skunkworks projects. Like we were talking before we started recording, Intel did that. It created a group that's like, hey, go figure out this LLM stuff and make it really good. And then they split off and started their own company,
Yeah.
Mosaic. But there are lots of big tech companies that do stuff like that. They have these R&D departments that are allowed to just play jazz and try to build products. Do you think in specific industries that you're involved in now that there would be a fear if companies did something like that, like it exists in the high tech market?
Would that cause me fear? Would that mean that I felt like they were more able to go and compete with us?
Would you have never even done what you've done and instead have done it at Thomson Reuters?
Oh, I see. So I've lived through this, and I'm trying to think about how much I'm allowed to say, like publicly. So I'll give you like for instance, there was a big company that I worked at where Thomson Reuters, they were going through a big transition in financial services where historically they had provided all the data into big financial services companies, but they were being crushed by Bloomberg, who also provided a terminal. Thomson Reuters had bought in and was not able to sell that financial services business because they were getting so beat up by Bloomberg. And so instead of being able to sell the business, which is their preferred way of doing it, they got caught with their pants down during an innovation cycle like we were talking about. And they said, shoot, we're going to have to build our own product, which is an unusual motion for that company. So they did two things. First, they took the internal team that was built using the old product and tried to get them to build a new one. And second, without telling that team, they hired a bunch of very startup-y fancy people to build it from scratch, using the same data sources without any of the infrastructure requirements. And it's fascinating to watch. The teams didn't know about each other, but I did because I worked for the head of strategy. And like at some point, like this sort of like strategy kind of, both failed basically. Like the incumbent failed because they weren't changing it enough. The new people failed because they were trying to do too much newfangled stuff, which like their big financial services clients wouldn't have ever agreed to do. And they collapsed the two teams into one to find kind of a happy medium. So I'm being a bit sort of broad in the strokes, but you get the idea. Like, I don't know that even if a big company could do that innovative thing, it's going to work for their customer base because, their customers expect certain things. So a very simple example is a release cycle. You have this innovative team at Thomson Reuters that wants to release every day, but their financial services clients expect the once a year release with 6 months notice of a sort of a cut in advance that they can start playing with. Fine, it's if that's what the customers need, it's okay, but you're not going to be able to do the fast innovative thing if you're expected to have one instance that's released a year. So it's just structurally difficult for them. Even at our scale, another way of looking at it, we think about, hey, if we're going to do a new project, do we want it within the core infrastructure we built, where there are even at our scale rules of how you deploy and how you do QA and how you do certain things. Versus, do we just want it like off to the side where somebody can go very quickly build something that works, at a smaller scale? And so even at our scale, we want that to happen off to the side, and it's tricky to figure out how it integrates. At a big company, it's not easy to do. So no is the answer in the end. Like I still don't have fear of big companies. Broadly, like the thing that makes people successful as startups is finding a market where you really understand that the market is growing, even if it's at a small place. And ideally, it's something that no one else sees. So they sometimes call this an earned secret, like something that other people don't know. And when you come in, like it turns out you're right. So like that special quadrant of it's something that other people don't see but is growing, and like you're right that like how you're going to serve it is where you really generate these massive businesses. So take like Airbnb as an example. Everyone thought it was the stupidest idea, if I'm allowed to say that, like at the beginning. Why would anybody stay in another home? That's the worst business. You should never do that. It turns out though that customers wanted that, and there was an explosion in the amount of people that were willing to rent their houses. And so it's the perfect storm for building a very big business without much competition.
How much of startup success is market timing?
Less than you think, honestly. Like definitely, like there is such a thing as being too early. So you think about like Webvan or something where people were trying to do delivery before some of the preconditions were met. And so like for sure, there's things about being too early. But like as I talk to people sometimes who are worried, like, should I start now or should I start in 6 months? Like that doesn't matter. Like if you believe that you're right over the next couple of years, like just get started. Because there are going to be a lot of things that you can figure out and solve that, will move you closer to your goal, even if the market isn't quite ready. So yes, if you're 20 years off, fine. Like the underlying technologies are not available to do a voice agent, and you're trying to do it a voice agent in the 1980s, it's probably going to be bad. But as long as you're within a couple of years, don't worry about it. Just start.
Got it. So yeah, I was referring more to larger market trends, and to me, it seems like timing these large trends is the key. Like if you're in the Gen AI space, you could have a piece of shit company and it would probably be getting some funding.
Yeah, but that's not success. Let's be really clear. Funding is not success. And like we need to end the YC version of the world where the success is getting some funding and getting in the paper. That's not. Like success is ultimately having customers who get value out of your product and repeatably getting value out of your product. being able to get some money from YC, some money from a seed investor, and then sell your company for $20 million and have it be an acquire, not success.
What is the minimum benchmark for success in your opinion?
Well, look, I'm not going to define another person's success like from like what somebody else wants. For
What about
me,
for yourself? Yeah.
my co-founder and I are ambitious. Like, we really have fun working with our customers, helping them. We ultimately work for B2C brands, helping them figure out how to better engage with their end customer, right? Using data to drive, when they should reach out, with what customer, with what message, on what channel. And so like, we like it, we enjoy it. I think, what we measure is, in our case, is how much revenue our customers are driving using our platform. So at this point, it's more than $3 billion have been driven in revenue by our customers using our platform. And that's exciting because it means that actually like it's having an impact. It's having a difference in how AAA and Angie and SoFi and Roman are engaging with their users. What's the target for that number? I don't have a target per se, but that is the North Star. We do watch like how much are we able to have an impact on their business.
Interesting.
But I don't look at number of employees. That's my pet peeve, actually, more than VC funding, is when one founder goes to another, goes, how many employees do you have? As if that's like the measuring contest. Like I'm much more impressed if you have a company doing 100 million in revenue with 20 employees than I am if you have a company with 1,000 employees. So employees is not the measuring stick. In fact, personally, we try as much as possible to have fewer employees doing more valuable work and have more vendors. There's a big advantage to outsourcing things that are not going to be your core structural advantage.
Like what?
So, take machine learning. Like, we're not going to go and build the best training models. So like, let's not try. Let's go find whoever's going to be best at that and work with them and push them, right? Give them feedback, right? Tell them what features matter to us, drive a lot of revenue to them so that we're an important part of their roadmap. And, then we can twist their arm when we need something. That's much better than having employees who are, doing that. Or the classic example in B2C businesses is customer service. If you're not going to have a path to promotion and to internal success for customer service agents, outsource it. Put it somewhere where someone else is managing that organization, where that person can have a fulfilling career within a separate organization, and you're not treating them like second-class citizens within yours. Make sure the people that are your employees you're investing in, and you're not treating like a different group of employees, and you're providing them a pathway to be promoted internally.
Okay. Follow up to that, just rapid firing. Ben was alluding to earlier that a lot of consultant built solutions are overblown, over engineered, especially if you're billing by the hour. There's a lot of inverse incentives. How do you know that your results from these external firms are good?
I mean, I'll give you like a small example, and then I can give you the long answer. When we used to outsource customer service at the last company I was at in the home services space, we'd always have a challenger model. So we'd have two outside organizations, like typically 75% with one, 25% with other. And then we always kept a few agents in-house. And that allowed us to just keep them honest and know like, hey, what it would look like when we had in-house agents versus this sort of like the two challengers. So there are ways of setting it up where you can keep people honest. That's a very tactical example. The longer example is, the beautiful part about technology companies is when you invest deep, research or building in a very hard problem, and then at scale, right, the margins for distributing that thing you've built are very high, and there's less level of investment that you need to make. So we can argue after about whether AI is even a good sort of software model, because it's unclear that the long-term margins are good, and there's a lot of upfront investment. But leave that aside. My point would be is that you're better off picking one hard problem and really, really spending your money and your time getting very good at that and having a big margin than trying to solve lots of easier problems and spreading out your sort of thinking power on many different things you're not going to be as good at.
Yeah, that reminds me of a lesson I learned super early, which was if you look at the distribution of returns in whatever you're doing, typically that long tail is where everybody dies. And there's a couple things that are really, really successful and powerful. And so getting a bunch of signal on a wide range of topics early is helpful, but then it's really advantageous to sink a lot of energy and effort into a few things or maybe even one thing.
Yeah.
So
I'll pick on AI to the conversation I was starting. Like, it's not clear that the long-term margin on AI is going to be good. Yes, it's clear that there's going to be a lot of investment dollars up front. But if I'm selling AI and it's either commodity, in which case like we all have to bring down pricing, or I keep having to do lots of things that look effectively like service or labor to make it work, meaning I need lots of training, which is like heavy cost, or lots of variable cost to do the compute. The margins aren't going to be that good, and so the return profile isn't going to be as good. I believe that businesses built on top of the AI infrastructures are going to use that AI to drive value for their businesses. But are AI businesses themselves going to be very profitable and good investments? I think TBD.
Ben, what's your opinion?
I think it entirely depends on how disruptive the free offerings become. And, that's something that we're working on at Databricks is like DBRX, that announcement a couple months ago. The things that are being worked on now, we're not in the business of, oh, well, let's retrain the next big one and it'll be more powerful. We are doing that, but the reason for doing all of this stuff, for offering these open source models that are, generally well trained on a bunch of topics, is to do the research of figuring out how can we make it so that we can take one of these foundation models and come up with a way to retrain it where it's exceptionally good, like better than humans at this one task or this one discrete area. And it's garbage at everything else, but you put guardrails on it. Say, hey, you can only answer questions about this. Or only interface about this, or only generate images that are in this style, or only generate audio in this style, whatever it may be. And that research train that's going on is yielding shocking results where it's all about how do you get the infrastructure cost down in both that variable cost, like GPUs are expensive, and also the time. And that's way more expensive when you really think about it. How do you shorten that so you can get something that's usable that you can build into your product and integrate, and not just give that into the hands of end users who are, B2C, because you need tech investment. You need to hire a staff that can do that. But if there's models and an infrastructure around that that's open sourced, companies like yours, Alex, can take all of that tooling and be like, we can iterate 1,000 times faster and cheaper because of this. And I think that's the goal right now with a number of companies, is trying to get that to be effectively seen as a commodity. I think it should be a commodity and should be cheap, but that's to empower people to use this stuff for useful things. And that's really where the value comes out of it. It's not about the tech.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that wholeheartedly. Like the metaphor I often use with people these days is flat screen TVs. When I say like the AI industry is going to be a lot like flat screen TVs. So what do I mean by that? Basically, at the beginning, if you wanted a big flat screen TV, it was like bulky and heavy and hard to get in the house, and it cost a fortune, and only the like billionaires would buy the big flat screen TVs. But today, what's happened is that the cost of all the parts in the flat screen TV has just plummeted. And the margins on that business has plummeted. And now everybody has access to big screen TV. Turns out it's not good to be in the flat screen TV business. Like all those businesses have really done very badly. However, to your point, it's created the video game industry, and it's created the movie industry, and it's created all these people that are able to now use that TV to do incredible things that are very profitable businesses. So, I do believe some of this AI should be a public good and should be, available more cheaply, and it will require a lot of investment. I guess my concern as I do invest a little bit is, hey, would I put a lot of money into the flat screen TV business, knowing what I know now? Probably not. Like, yes, it needs to happen, but if I'm doing it for public good, fine. If I'm doing it for a return, probably not a good idea.
So the key for AI businesses who are doing this research is to provide a compelling service that people can build on top of. That's like our goal for what we're doing.
Or go and be the next, platform for building video games, or be the next video game. Those are all going to be fantastic businesses because they don't have that enormous cost of research and R&D.
What's your take on chips and the ROI there?
As a business model, like should people be building businesses for new chips? honestly, I know very little about the hardware business, so I'm not like, my opinion is pretty much worthless on it. But structurally, like, my belief is the same as the comments I was making on TV, which is we have demonstrated an ability to use innovation to drive down the costs and up the processing power of computers. Now, as I understand it, there are physical limitations to silicon chips, but we're now researching other kinds of chips, and there could be quantum computing one day and other things. So all the limits that we hit that provide, create real cost, I believe there's a good chance that we push through those and continue to, create more compute power at less cost, basically. So, if I'm a betting man, I don't bet that, like, it doesn't change. I bet that it continues to get cheaper, basically.
Hmm. And then in the AI space, what do you think are the high ROI fields or just things? What are or even like underlying market trends or tenants?
Yeah, like, so a couple different ways of looking at it. One is, I know everybody's been quoting it, but Altman's comment about, hey, like, if you're building a business on top of OpenAI, like, you're probably pretty silly to bet that it's OpenAI is not going to keep getting better. Like, do something that bets that OpenAI is going to keep getting better, and use that to your advantage. So yeah, I think all these people that have built like little basic things, like, what do they call it these days, like prop stuffing or whatever on top of OpenAI, like, that's probably not going to be a great business. But if your business, as their LLM gets better, your business gets better, like, then that probably would be better. So I think be careful about what bet you're taking, as this technology changes. And then the other comment I'd make is back to what I was saying before. Look for areas where you have an earned secret, right? Look for areas where you believe something to be true that no one else does. So today, the most common use, I think, or one of the most common uses of generative AI is in inbound text customer service. Everybody knows that inbound text customer service is an area ripe for disintermediation, if we want to use that word, for generative AI to replace a human being. And so there's a million people working on it. And if today you can charge 500, or let's just say $5,000 a month for that generative AI agent, well, in 10 years it's going to be $500 a month, right? The cost is going to fall astronomically fast. Instead, go find an area where maybe it's a smaller market today, but fewer people know about it, and there's more growth opportunity without as much competition. You'll be able to build a better business. So look a little further than the obvious things, I would say.
Okay.
So I know I'm not making specific recommendations. Like, these are more sort of general themes that I would look for if I was starting a business on top of AI today.
And what's your take on the AI will disrupt and take everyone's job, and then we won't have jobs opinion?
If you look at the history of technology innovation, the washing machine, internet, cell phones, whatever, email, like, it's fascinating what happens. Even automation in factories is a great example. Like, it's fascinating what happens each time, where it destroys a huge number of jobs, but then it creates a huge number of new jobs. And overall, like, I'm much happier with the way in which we work today than how my father worked. Right? When my father came in at 21 and started working, and it was a professional job, and he needed to know something, he, like, took the afternoon off and went to the library and started reading books, right? If he needed to, like, call people, he had to go figure out their number somewhere, and, like, rotary phones start, like, and often had to physically get on a plane to go and see them in China. Like, just the amount of time it took to do things was very, very significant. I can do that same thing in a morning by using the internet and by getting on Zoom and talking to the person. So massive efficiencies, but it's not like we've destroyed jobs. If anything, we've created new opportunities for jobs. So structurally, I am a believer in the deflationary force of AI, in that using AI will bring down the cost of products because there'll be fewer humans involved in the chain. But one, that means you don't need to make as much money. And I believe also it'll create a lot of new jobs that allow people to find new careers.
Yeah, there's an interesting anecdotal story that I tell some people who know that I used to work in a semiconductor fab. So I worked at the biggest one in North America for 3.5 years or something. And the job that I was doing was analyzing yield performance. Like, hey, we have defects on the chips. We were making the chips that go into cell phones back at the time. And they're very complex, lots of things on them. And just one little tiny speck of dust or something that's embedded in there, in that wafer on that chip, it's trashed. And my team was tasked with figuring out trends and analyzing, like, what is this failure mode? What does it actually do when it's in this area of the chip? And how can we see that on test or detect it earlier? And I remember talking to one of the metrology engineers where we had this one incident, and they're using scanning electron microscopes to determine morphology of these defects. And I was standing over the guy's shoulder, and I was like, "Hey, Dan, like, can you walk me through the process that you use for, detecting this thing and telling like what it's made out of and where could it have possibly come?" And he just turned to me. He's like, "Man, I hate this part of my job. Like, I hate it." He's like, "It's so monotonous." He's like, "Oh," he's like, "if you have 4 hours, sit down next to me. I'll show you what I do." And at the end of it, I was almost falling asleep. I was so bored with how many screens and how many, different manual tasks that he had to go through to look at this thing and then submit it for additional testing and then walk over to the lab and do all this stuff. And that was in the first 3 months of me working there. So I was trying to learn how all this stuff worked. By the time I left, there was no human involved in that. It was built into the scanning machines. They could determine all of that stuff. And it was using machine learning embedded in the chips in this thing, not what everybody now is thinking about AI and stuff, but, true, traditional machine learning. And I remember going up to him before I quit that place. I was like, "What do you do with your time now that you're not wasting it like that?" He's like, "I do my actual job, the interesting stuff." He's like, you know that incident that happened 2 weeks ago where we lost $1 billion worth of product?" I'm like, "No, what are you talking about?" He's like, "Exactly." He's like, "I'm able to focus on what I should be focusing on instead of doing something that a machine can do."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, that's what AI is going to do."
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting to think about how that could also accelerate the growth of humanity too. Did you guys see the three body problem or read the books?
No, I haven't done it yet. Is it good?
I didn't read the books. I like started to zone out midway through the first chapter, but apparently the best things ever. If you have the attention span. But I thought the show was solid, and one of the core tenets of the show is basically humans are going to evolve at sort of an exponential rate, and I think that that's speaking to this. If you can start automating the boring and let people focus on the fundamentally human, fundamentally creative aspects of the job, it's really exciting to see this exponential curve. Like in the next 50 years, we could be completely in a different space relative to the next two or the prior 200 years. So
Yeah,
we'll
I mean,
see.
if we're really being futurist, right? At the birth rate today, max population will be in, I think it's 100 years to 300 years, depending on who you talk to. So after that, the population is going to crash, not slowly, but like astronomically. And so if we haven't built robots and AI and all this stuff that will enable us to have a lower population number, like that population is going to be in trouble. Or we have to somehow magically increase birth rates from whatever the 1.8 it is now back up above 2.1.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like what is the carrying capacity of the earth? That's relevant too. But not quite machine learning topics. Yeah, so Alex, I wanted to shift gears a little bit back to your work experience. It seems like you've done a like very broad array of jobs, ranging from sales to marketing to growth to product. How has that set you up to be a good leader or a bad leader?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. First of all, I believe in a liberal arts undergrad education. Whatever it is you study, I think as long as you really are interested in it and deeply engaged with that topic, like it's a great way to spend 4+ years. So I encourage people to do that. I do think like it was good that I understood like every company would be a technology company and made that shift into being a product manager. By no means, I'm not an engineer, and I don't pretend to be one, but like I'm close enough to be dangerous. Like I understand in the areas that we work in some of what's going on. And if people today tell me they want to be a CEO, I say, well, like how good are you in technology? Like if you don't understand the underlying technology, you think they're going to make you the CEO of the company? Like that doesn't happen anymore. That those days are gone. So I do think like everybody should go through some level of training. And when I interview people today, one of the questions is like, have you ever built a website? Have you ever used SQL? Not because I want them to be good at it, but if they've never done that, how are they going to possibly understand the things that are going on in the company? I think the other sort of experience was very valuable to me was having seen sort of what big companies thought management was, and then going to a smaller company where it was a very different perspective, where it wasn't, hey, the more people that work for you, the more important you are. It was more actually like the more redundant you can make yourself as a manager, the better you are, which is a very big shift. And it's important when we bring people in who are managers to teach them about this and say, look, if you go and make yourself so important in a specific team that everything is going through, is that good? And they go, oh yeah, because I'm very important in the team. And I go, no, that's not good. In fact, not only won't I promote you, I can't promote you. And they go, what do you mean? I go, I physically can't promote you because you are so integral to what that team is doing. And they go, oh shit, you're right. Like on the other hand, had you spent your time digging into it, and I believe in doing the work and actually being an IC as part of being a manager, but then ask yourself, how do I make it so that I'm redundant, whether that's through technology, processes, hiring, whatever, and then come back to me and said, Alex, you thought this management job cost you 200 grand a year. I've turned it into something that I do in 10% of my time, which basically means it's only costing you 20 grand a year. So either hire a lower level person to do my job, or let me do that with 10% of my time and give me a different job. Now I'm like praising the ground that you work on, because you've shown not only can you manage that team, but you have the capability of solving more complicated problems, and I can give you a bigger, meatier thing. And believe me, there always are bigger, meatier things. So the task, I think, of learning what it is to be a manager, or in my experience, learning what it is to be a manager, like that was a big mindset shift. Not saying I do it well all the time, but like was an important mindset shift. And then I think having been at startups, seeing what I liked about what founders did, what I didn't like was good. Like, I think it's really hard when people go and be a founder the first time, having not worked at startups, because they don't have a reference point. And I'm not saying you have to go work at the best startup. Just go work at a startup because you're going to learn, like, how do they manage people? How do they do decisions? How many founders are there? X, Y, and Z, and see what you agree with and what you don't. I think without that, like, it takes an extra year or two just to get going. But because my co-founder and I had seen all that, we hit $1 million of revenue within 6 months of starting the company, 3 million within 12 months of starting the company. Like, we didn't have to spend a year or two working on all that stuff because we had already had a good idea of how it worked. So, am I perfect as a CEO? By no means. And there's a lot of areas for me to improve in, but definitely like having those experiences has helped me a lot.
What are the things you avoided making mistakes on by knowing how startups work?
The biggest one is the nuts and bolts of operating a startup. Just, things like that to us feel simple, but I think you find out are really complicated to founders who've never done it. Like, how do you set up an office? How do you hire people? How do you fire people? How do you manage people? How do you create goals for the company? How do you do basic financials? How do you run a board meeting? Like, the founders we worked for before tell this hysterical story where when they were first-time founders, they raised some money from General Catalyst, and they, get in a bus and go to Boston for their first board meeting, and they sit down, and first of all, they go say hi to this guy who's actually their lawyer, not the like outside lawyer. They didn't even know. That's embarrassing. And then they go, okay, guys, what are we talking about? And the investors are like, well, so did you bring a deck? Like, they didn't even know they had to create content for this meeting. And like, they're going, well, we're going to go print out a bunch of stuff. So they leave the room, print out a bunch of stuff, and they like try to like somehow do this meeting. And after the meeting, they're walking back to the bus to go back to New York City from Boston. They get a call from their lead investor, says, hey, I know we just gave you $3 million. You can just return it. Imagine that call. Like, your first board meeting goes so badly, your investor says you can give the money back. It's okay. And they go, no, don't worry. Like, we understand now the expectation. But, it's not their fault. If they had never seen what that meeting was supposed to be like. And so that caused them extra consternation that wouldn't have been needed.
Interesting. So it's on the logistics side.
A lot of it, yeah. You can't imagine how much time first-time founders waste on this stuff. Where it's not, again, not their fault. They just haven't done it before. Like, between my co-founder and I, we've probably hired 500, 1,000 people. Not that we're perfect at it, but like, we've done it enough times that we can create a process and know what to do and know how to make sure it sort of at least works.
So then where do you spend your creative energy?
There are plenty of hard problems in a business, right? You want to be focused on those. Like, the framework I sometimes say to people is like, if you're leaving the office at the end of the day satisfied and happy, you're not doing your job. And they go, again, that's like strange way of looking at it. I go, well, that means you're solving easy problems. That means that you're solving something you know how to do. And look, there are some jobs at certain companies where that's the task. It's just do the job you know how to do. Fine. But in a companies like ours, that's not the task. If every day we're coming in and solving problems we know how to solve, we're not moving forward and people are thus catching up with us. On the other hand, if you're leaving the end of the day frustrated and you're going, oh, this problem, I can't figure out this answer, or how do I do this thing? Frustrated about the right things. Like, I don't want you to be frustrated by your coworker, but if you're frustrated about the problem, that's good because you're trying to solve something that no one else knows how to do. You're moving it forward, you're figuring it out. And even if you're failing at first, that's getting you closer to the answer. So I'd much rather you be doing that hard work every day, knowing that you're solving something no one else has ever done before and moving the company forward.
That makes sense. I'm frustrated 99% of my days.
But
So
again, the thing to remember is don't go home and go, it's bad to be frustrated. Go home
right.
and go, how lucky am I as a human being that I get to live in this job where I get to do things no one else has ever done before. Like, that's so much better than, oh yeah, I came home and I know exactly what my day tomorrow is going to, in my opinion. Like, it depends what you want. Like, the other people want a different kind of life. But for me, like, that's exciting. If every rock I turn over every day is a new thing that I don't know the answer to.
Yeah.
I think that's excellent advice for anybody at any level of management, be it from a group leader on a technical team all the way to any big company CEO, CT, any e-staff member. And I've noticed parallels between what you just explained and all of the great leaders that I've ever interacted with, is they're all thinking about that, but they're not just thinking about that and then keeping it to themselves. They're imparting that to the people that need to hear it. And I remember early on in my career, getting into tech, that I was almost had that feeling of being afraid because the world that I worked in before, you had to know what you were doing and come up with a formulated plan of like, okay, I'm going to spend my time and plan this out and then do a physical experiment. And if I can't just test this thing without a solid hypothesis, because it costs millions of dollars, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then moving into tech, it's like, no, just try to build this thing. We don't know if it's possible, but you'll figure it out. And then getting that panic of like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it was almost anxiety inducing of like moving into that. I remember a really good VP sat down with me and explained almost exactly what you just said. It's like, you should feel that and you should enjoy that feeling because it means you're going into the unknown and you're doing something complicated. And the reason we told you to do it is because we think you can do it. So go do it and don't worry about if you mess up. And I was like, you know what? That's good advice. He's like, well, thanks. Now
Yeah.
go do it. And don't worry if you mess it up.
Yeah, it is. It is. We're lucky. We're so lucky to work in a job where there's new things to be done, and we have the opportunity to experiment and fail. Like, not everybody has that opportunity.
It sounds like it's a lot of nurture and not nature, though. Everybody has to learn to like this.
No, I mean, my co-founder and I, or I'll speak for myself. Like, I didn't even know how miserable I was by the time the last company we took from $1 million in revenue to $1.5 billion. It was a public company at that point. I wasn't happy managing managers where we have all this. It wasn't what I wanted to do. It makes me personally very happy to be in this newer environment where we're learning new things. Not everybody's the same. Like, there are plenty of people that are very happy in that other environment. So I'm not trying to put my values on other people. I'm suggesting that if what you want is that faster moving environment, don't look at that frustration or that fear as a sign that you're not good enough for it, or you shouldn't be doing it, or that something is going wrong. In fact, to your point, that fear is a sign that you're doing it right and you're in the right place. So it's a weird thing to learn that's actually a positive feeling, not a negative feeling.
And eventually you get addicted to it and that's all you want,
Yeah.
and then you get hired at, fast moving startups. They're like, yeah, everybody around you is the same way. And you're like, oh, this is kind of great.
Yeah. So I think, when we think about the organization, like, one of the pieces that we're proudest of is my co-founder and I made a decision about what values we thought would make this company successful at this stage. Now, that doesn't mean it's for every company or every stage, but thought about those and wanted to make sure people made decisions in that way. So when I think about the values of the company, it's not ping pong and parties. It's how do we make decisions? Because, if we can make sure that people coming in agree with the way we make decisions and like that, this is all going to go swimmingly. When people come in, even if they're great and they don't agree with the way we make decisions, we should be very honest about that and say, maybe this is not the right cultural fit. Just as an example, at Google, I have a lot of friends there who loved it, but I find that it's very consensus driven, very slow in decision making, not very database in some teams. Like there are certainly database teams, but many teams it's about things other than data, would frustrate me. And I don't think I could work in an organization that was consensus driven and not data based.
So how do you make decisions?
Within Regal, we focus a lot on, first, what's right for the customer. Second, like, how do you do things quickly? Meaning like, be 80% right rather than, be 100% right. How do you use data to make your life easier? And as we're sort of on a more engineering sort of focused podcast, let's say, you have two engineers who are trying to decide what database to use for something new. And really what you're going to do is run some SQL query in this new example. It's easy. In many companies, they'd argue over which database is better. My suggestion, don't argue. Just say, hey, what we're trying to do is run the SQL query faster, run it in one, run it in the other, see which is faster, and you made your decision. So by turning it from an opinion-based debate to a database debate, you've solved it because you've moved faster and not had this like tete-a-tete, right? I'm not saying that opinions are bad. People think usually when I say you have to use data that opinions are bad. No, what I'm saying is use opinions as a starting point, not an ending point. So if there is no data and you say, hey, at the last company, X, Y, and Z work, great. You've just that's a shortcut to get started. But the second you started, then start creating a way to use data to see if you were right or to alter what you're doing until you find the right thing for your company. So, we're not saying always data, but, often use data to make your life easier. And then, at our stage, for instance, we talk about growth being sort of the solution to all problems. More growth for our customers, more revenue for us, more opportunity for employees. So that's kind of the tiebreaker. That doesn't happen forever, but at this stage, like you do want to make the decision leads to more growth rather than something else. And there's other values, but those are just some of the ones we think about making sure people understand as they're going and making decisions about what to do.
Crystal clear. Well put. One more question. So Ben and I have been chatting a lot about your prior topic of the importance of making yourself redundant. And typically that can be achieved through mentorship and sort of teaching the people around you how to do your job. How do you think about mentoring? Do you have sort of a to-do list of these are the 7 things that this person needs to be able to achieve? What's your approach?
Yeah, honestly, I'd say it's something that I'm not as good at, especially in this environment. I think in more stable environments, it's something that I'm better at, where you have more time to focus on that. At our stage as a company, we pick what we do is for every new employee, one of the things we do is at 90 days, we say, here's the value you're living the best. And here's one thing basically I want you to work on. So good and bad, but it's not bad, just the thing that we think would have a lot of impact in what you're doing. And so within that, then we try to support them. And it's not always mentorship, right? By me, it might be, hey, here's a class. It might be, here's a book. It might be, here's somebody I want you to meet with once a month that's from outside the company. It might be me just holding them, keeping them honest, saying, hey, we said we were going to, you agreed, we said we were going to work on your ability to negotiate internally for assets or whatever. And here are 3 examples in the last week. How did they go? So I don't know that that's me being a good mentor as much as it is me just sort of being the mirror, coach to some extent, which is a slightly different thing. But yeah, as I think the company gets bigger, my role and sort of the teams become more stable, my role shifts, and many managers will shift into being more of a mentor when you then have more of a middle management layer. We don't really have that middle management layer as such. There are middle managers, but it's not a big enough company that there's enough time spent on mentoring, I'd say, honestly.
Got it. So it's a function of organization size. And as you get bigger and more stable.
My opinion, you talk to other people and they'll say, there are other CEOs I know where they don't do any individual contributor work. And if they want something done, they mentor the person. We believe a little differently. We believe all managers should be spending 20-30% of their time doing IC work. And part of getting, to the right answer is being in the details. That doesn't mean I need to be the decision maker on it. That's a different role. But being involved as an IC, understanding and digging into it is a very different mode than mentorship.
Ben, how does Databricks operate on the balance between IC, like deep IC work, and mentorship?
Once you get to a certain level in the IC org and engineering, you are strongly encouraged to be a mentor. So that's separate than management. So managers, like that's a weekly task for them. Every direct report, they're having a customized conversation with that person. It's going through like, what are you working on? What are you struggling with? How can I help you? What do you want to do next quarter? What do you want to do next year? Are you happy? Typical management questions with employees. Make sure, their number one priority is make sure that people are happily working and they're going to stay there and continue to do great work. And they don't regret, signing a contract to work here. That's a big thing. And if they are unhappy, how to make them happy if they're good. But for the mentor-mentee thing, it's dual-sided as well. So most mentors are themselves mentees in our structure. And it's done in such a way that the mentor is adapting what they're imparting, be it technical or soft skills, to their mentee for whatever that person needs. So you need to be, senior enough and to have seen a bunch of stuff. And most of those people, at least at Databricks Engineering, are people that have done I've worked for a big tech company. I've worked for 3 or 4 startups. I've worked for another big tech company, and now I'm here. So they know the dynamics of their mentees team, even though they might not know all those people. They know where all those people came from in general, so they can give them advice on like, this is how you should interact with these people, and this is how your team does what it does, and why people do this sort of thing. And it makes for it sort of creates this environment that's unique here that I haven't seen at many other places, where there's this camaraderie. It's like everybody knows that everybody's going through this sort of help each other out thing. So everybody just is helping people out that they don't even know in almost a friendly way. Like there's nothing coming from on top, from C-suite down, saying you will work as a team or we're all one family. I've never heard that sentence at this company, and I don't think I ever will. Everybody just gets it. We're a tribe, and you help out your tribe members in whatever way they need. So it's super successful here. I've seen that forced function at other companies just create misery and make people just hate, like, oh, I got a meeting with my mentor today and see how bad this is. And they have a checklist that's printed out and they have to go through bulleted items from HR, and everybody's like, this is such a waste of time. So it works here because people care.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So I will quickly summarize. Lots of cool insights here. Some things that stood out to me were startups are successful when the startup is right and other people don't see the potential, but that industry is still growing. Don't look at number of employees. It's a bad metric. For outsourcing your work, you can use the like 75-25 split between 2 providers and then make that a dynamic ratio if one is doing better or worse. And then for promotions, make yourself redundant. If you're essential to your existing team, you can't be promoted out of your role. And then finally, for Regal's decision framework, they look to be more in the 80% right than the 100% right category. They also start with opinions, but ensure that they use data to validate the opinion, and then growth is the North Star. So, Alex, if people want to learn more about you or Regal or anything else, where should they go?
Yeah, please visit regal.io. You can always email me at hello@regal.io. I'd say particularly, if you're a consumer organization with a big contact center, trying to figure out how to better engage your customers throughout, either new customers or existing customers throughout the life cycle. Feel free to reach out. We always love chatting about it.
Cool. All right. Well, until next time, it's been Michael Burke and my co-host,
Ben Wilson.
and have a good day, everyone.
We'll catch you next time.